But when that happened, this little $3.5 million business, all of a sudden that one order was about $20 million. So it was the one order that took this company from being this little thing that bumped along for decades that it could never grow beyond.
Welcome to the TrustBuilt Podcast. Here's your host, Alan Bennett, and special guest, Scott Bowman. Welcome to the show.
And Scott, if you will take a few minutes to introduce yourself and talk about your journey as an entrepreneur.
Okay, thanks, Al, for having me on. I appreciate this opportunity. I got my undergraduate degree from Kansas State University in 1985, went right into the military. After all my basic military schooling, I was stationed in Bennett, Germany with the 8th Infantry Division. I was in that unit from 85 to 1990. During that period of time, I was able to get my master's from Boston University. Immediately upon ETSing from the military, I joined KPMG Marwick as a consultant, spent a year with them, and then was recruited by Walmart to do some things in their transportation group to help modernize the way they acquired and distributed repair parts for their private fleet. I did that for about a year with Walmart and was moved over to be a merchandise buyer at Walmart. I was a buyer for Walmart about 3 years. In 1994, after a number of just things where I was feeling frustrated that I was not able to do some of the things I wanted to do as part of a big bureaucratic organization, around the same time NAFTA was really starting to kick off, I decided to leave Walmart's and open a company that would basically exploit NAFTA to move the production of products from were traditionally in the United States under the Maquiladora Program down in Mexico. I did that for a couple of years until the World Trade Organization ramp up for China kicked in and NAFTA began to fade. So I went back into consulting at that point for about 3 years, kept the business open because I had a couple small clients where I could work part-time supporting them, but then did big-time consulting with Computer Sciences Corporation, had clients like Chevron or Hewlett-Packard. And most of what we were doing there were very large business process outsourcing around a vertical like accounting or managing their IT department, something like that. And then I did a small stint for about 6 months with an organization went around right now. It's a public organization called the Worldwide Retail Exchanges back in the early 2000s where they were building portals. So I was in with that organization, sort of leading their consulting and sales group. Did that for about 6 months, and then they wanted to make some changes that I didn't really feel aligned with, so I was able to get a golden parachute, and I was able then to have enough money then to go back and re-engage full time in my consulting and product development and sales practice. So I spent a couple years working with a number of clients. And my focus was always on helping medium and small sized businesses sell into Walmart initially. Walmart had the most disciplined, detailed set of connections that allowed you to have a more, rather than just a point-to-point connection between a salesman and a buyer, where you'd had connections through this tool called Retail Link that would let you have a much more rich connection with Walmart in terms of understanding your business. So I did that for a while, and I kept running into the situation where I could get a client to sell and we'd be successful for about a year, but immediately the minute Walmart began to scale up the requirements around what they wanted that client to be able to do, they would begin to fail because they didn't have the right tools in place to help them manage that business. So after a couple iterations of going through that process with a number of different clients getting them in, helping achieve initial success and then failure, I began to realize that target group of customers would never be able to, on their own, be able to be successful as the technological requirements, not just at Walmart, but a number of other big retailers at that point were demanding. So I realized that through my experience, I'd like to tell you that what I'm doing today, I sort of had some great vision. I didn't. I backed into it. And this is sort of the experience I went through as I backed into it. And, when I talk to people about that now, they always say, oh, well, wasn't that lucky that you were there at that time and able to do that? So look, there's no such thing as luck. Good luck is really where opportunity meets preparedness. And that's essentially what happened. Without really understanding it, that all the things I've done in my career, the things with big data with the military, managing repair parts systems, the things with cost systems, control systems, criteria that I did with KPMG, the big business outsourcing projects I was doing with CSC, my time having been spent as a buyer at Walmart, all those things came together, and I realized, well, I really have a unique set of experiences that would allow me to create a BPO, business process outsourcing business, uniquely designed to support these medium and small businesses in the US. And increasingly, as we were beginning to see, obviously the World Trade Organization and this massive surge in China, smaller or bigger businesses, even in foreign countries, who had no organic footprint in the United States, but wanted to do business direct. So I targeted those customers, and it was pretty successful. We were able to write our own software that would do all the background stuff, the operations control, accounting, supply chain management, item management, the things you need to have in place to have a sort of disciplined control environment in which to do business with these bigger retailers. So I was very able to quickly find enough clients that I could launch this business. That happened in the fourth quarter of 2003 and the first quarter of 2004. And we were able to land our first client, and there were only 3 of us at the time. And we were able then to establish the first sort of, I'm going to call it broad-based sort of business process outsourcing rules and systems and processes in place. And obviously since then, where we are today is far more complex, far more integrated, both up and down the supply chain. We now have like 13 clients. They all range in sizes from maybe 150 million down to as little as less than $1 million a year. Trying to do business with Amazon, Walmart, Target, Home Depot, Lowe's, the biggest retailers in the US. So that's sort of my background that brings you up to speed on kind of where we are today.
So let's go back to the decision that I'm going to do my own thing. Let's talk about that for just a second. Tell me about the thought process and the steps that led up to making that decision. And then also add in any mentors or support people that you had that helped you with that decision to move into your own.
I had always had a situation in which I was always pushing the innovation envelope. And in every position I ever held, it doesn't matter whether it's in the Army, Walmart, KPMG, these are large organizations that hire people and want you to perform specific sets of functions, much like a Lego, okay? And they do it on purpose because they need to have people be replaceable, right? And that's just not how I operate. I operate much more around Clausewitzian, Auftragtaktik, push responsibility down and out, seize the initiative. It doesn't matter. The idea that that's not my job never occurs to me, okay? And so I was running into that. And what really happened in the final end is in my final annual evaluation at Walmart, I pretty much made the decision that if they weren't going to give me the freedom and start paying me for the value I was actually delivering, I already had a letter of resignation written. And the moment that my senior evaluator, if you want to call him at that point, said, Bowman, why can't you just go out and be a good buyer? And I was like, Dave, I am a good buyer. I could do the job of 3 buyers. This is not hard to do. If you're literate and you're numerate and you understand the process of how it works and you understand what your role is, it's not so hard to do, because I was able to build a bunch of tools that let me do the job a lot more effectively and efficiently. And because my background in big data and managing data and integration of data and forming it into useful information and extracting knowledge. So I had more of a background than most buyers. I mean, if you think about it, most buyers came from backgrounds like marketing. So they weren't even as numerate or didn't have the same tool set, if you will, the intellectual toolkit that I had. I came from a different background completely than any other buyer out there. And I got to the point where it's like, look, I'll never be what I'd like to be if I put into someone else's hands the control of my life. And so for me, it was more about, I want to take back control of my life. And I would tell you, most of my mentors were military people. I mean, I looked to them even when I was out of the military. The lessons I learned while I was in the military around seizing the initiative and a willingness to take risks, I've lived that life. And that's, I think, one of the key things that you need as an entrepreneur. You need to be prepared to turn on a dime and take risks. If you're risk averse, you're really going to struggle as an entrepreneur. And that's why I made the choice. I mean, at the time, I didn't even know exactly how I was going to pull all this together, but I knew, based on major things happening in the market and in my unique position as a furniture buyer at Walmart, man, there's got to be a way to do things cheaper than what's happening. And from literally within the first 90 days of my departure from Walmart at that point, I'd already structured a whole product line and was actually having product coming across the border and made more money in that 90 days than what I was asking for an entire year at Walmart.
That's fantastic. That's the kind of story I love. I love having on this show. Thanks for sharing that. So now let's go to that next milestone, or what I always refer to as the next milestone, is the tipping point when having the confidence to run the business was there, and you knew that the business was going to grow in the direction you intended it to. Kind of talk through that process. Where was that tipping point, that turning point, that milestone? Where was that for you?
Well, I mean, there's a lot that happened between that milestone and my initial leaving Walmart, because I had a catastrophic failure within a year after that big event where I made a ton of money. I was operating with a business partner who then stole $750,000 from me. And that basically almost put me out of business. He actually did an end run around me. So I was the middleman between this big customer in the US and all the factory environment down in Mexico. And I had a partner who was working with me in this. Because we needed the ability to move money, the account, he had access to the account. So what he did is he did an end run around me. And that end run, he flew up to visit in Michigan, the customer, and they together decided, hey, Bowman's making all this money. Well, what we'll do is we'll just split it. And then we'll take the customers by themselves. We don't need him anymore. This was after I developed the product line, after all my knowledge. And this guy you needed to make sure he wasn't cheating. Like you can't cheat when you're saying they're making a fire retardant mattress. It either is or it isn't. You either got the right amount of fire retardant in the product or you don't. And I knew that this guy would cheat. And I actually told that client, he will put you in a position where you may be out of business within 2 years. And within 2 years, they were both gone. That put me in a serious bind. I had one client left. I had to struggle just to keep that one client. I could barely scrape by and make a living. So I went from being absolute high of the high, all of a sudden down to, I got to put food on the table. And that level of stress. And I got to the point where, man, I need to find a way to catch my breath. And that's when I was telling you earlier that I actually went back into consulting, and I spent some time where I actually learned about business process outsourcing with Computer Sciences Corporation. So it's a big part of what they did. They would go in and, let's say, to Dr. Pepper, and they would buy up all the ERP systems and the people, and they would run that organization for Dr. Pepper on behalf of Dr. Pepper. That's a BPO, business process outsourcing. So when I decided then at some point that I really want to be back full time on my own, just working with my clients on my own, that was about 2001. So think about what happened then is that you had the big dot bomb, the big dot-com bomb, the
Yeah.
implosion of that industry. So that's when I was able to get out and I had a golden parachute, I had some time and some money, and then to go back into, but this time, instead of being a sourcing and product development company, I was going to be more focused on sales and supply chain management. So selling a product in and helping my clients understand the demand patterns and things that were needed so you could stay ahead of the demand curve. And I quickly realized that this was another situation where I can only do so much when I only operate at the very sharp end of the spear. If there's no staff on the end of the spear, there's no power, there's no longevity in the ability to do business with a Walmart. So I decided then at that point, the only way I could be successful with these clients that are smaller is that I had to be able to help them do all these more difficult, complex business processes. And I realized at that moment, wow, that was when I had this epiphany. As I told you earlier, I didn't get into this business with some grand plan. Like I'm in university, I visualized the internet didn't exist when I graduated from university. Many of the things I need to make this business as it exists today didn't exist, but they were just beginning to start to happen in the early 2000s. And that's when I realized, man, all my experience of what I did in the Army, what I did with KPMG, what I did at Walmart, what I did at CSC, all these things came together and allowed it. And all of a sudden I had that, again, no such thing as luck. Good luck is when opportunity meets preparedness. And I realized, wow, I have the skills now to go do all these cool things, but I got to go build it first. But that's kind of my epiphany. In the 2003, 2004, the frustration of, again, my destiny's in somebody else's hands, my destiny's in the capability of these customers. Man, we're riding the largest pony in the barnyard, but we can't stay on it. We keep falling off because we don't know how to stay in the saddle. We can't get our feet in the straps and ride that horse and make a good living. And I just decided that was enough. So I got with one of my clients and said, look, guys, I'm gonna be honest, you suck at this. I mean, that's that kind of relationship. It was with the president and the vice president of the company. I said, look, guys, you are not good at this stuff. And my relationship with them was good enough that I could just basically be so frank and honest, you suck, you're terrible. Let me do it for you. And what I did then at that point, they finally agreed. We agreed to a number. We said, I need 6 months to build this thing. Let me go to your factories. Let me go to your distribution points. Let me map all your business processes for you. We mapped all those business processes. Then we turned back around and said, okay, what's Walmart going to require? Because initially this was all about, hey, I just want to take care of Walmart. And then they threw me a loop and came back and said, well, if you do this, you need to do it for everybody. If we're going to sell, you're going to set up this up. We want it for Target. We want it for everyone. And I said, okay, fine. And at that point, I reached into Walmart and hired my brother, who's a coder. He writes software. He's a CPA as well. And he had been a guy that actually helped Walmart develop a lot of their business processes around how do you do merchandising logistics. So they call them an MLM, merchandising logistics manager. And he wrote the software for Walmart initially to figure out how do we go through a case pack optimization? How do we go through a network, distribution network optimization? These kinds of internal cost accounting functions. And we started to bolt on these other things that had really nothing to do with basic accounting, but they feed the ERP system. And our first client we brought on, I think they were only paying us $20,000 a month. So if you think about, you've got their CFO, their COO, their chief marketing officer, we were all of those things. And they got us for about $20,000 a year or a month for all of these services. So we provided all their IT infrastructure, all of the what I'll call core underlying IT infrastructure components, both hardware, software, basic operating environment, and then the ERP system on top, and then all the bolt-on capability sets. And we managed everything. We did it with 3 guys because their business was small. Then an interesting thing happened where we really knew that this was going to take off. When we helped this one client grow, we had built I was still working in product development with one of their people, and we built the first X-Rocker. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's a sound share. And it was at the beginning point of when gaming was beginning to take off. And what we had done is looked in the marketplace at all these different kinds of items where sound was beginning to be made part of something. And we cannibalized a bunch of parts, and we came up with this thing called the X-Rocker. It's basically a little rocking chair that sits on the ground and had speakers in it up here by where your head is. And we built this Frankenstein little thing. I mean, we made it look okay, but seriously, we were literally borrowing parts from just a whole bunch of different things. And I took it to the buyer and I said, man, this is the future of gaming here. And long story short is, she took the one sample we had and I said, look, you can keep it, but you got to promise to give me back the sample. And, we're only going to give you an exclusive, but, if you're not willing to take it, I want my sample back so I can go to Target.
Mm-hmm.
So she kept the sample, and I didn't really hear from her for, I don't know, about a month. And then I get an email, just no communication with me at all. I just got an email over the transom. And I looked at it and thought, okay, this is good news, it's bad news. So I immediately got on the phone and called the buyer and said, hey, Kristen, thank you first for the business. We love it. We love doing business with Walmart. Thank you very much. By the way, did you put the comma in the wrong spot? And she said, no. We want 250,000 units of this by Black Friday. And that was a big, oh shit moment, because we didn't even have a factory in China set up for this item yet. So it was, we're in trouble. 250,000 units. So when I called the owner, I said, well, you want the good news or the bad news? And he goes, well, what's the good news? Well, the good news is Kristen wants the X-Rocker for Black Friday. He goes, oh, that's awesome. Great. Good job, Bowman. And he goes, how many they ordered? I said, well, that's the bad news. They want 250,000 units. But when that happened, this little $3.5 million business, all of a sudden that one order was about $20 million. So it was the one order that took this company from being this little thing that bumped along for decades, and it could never grow beyond about $3.5 million. And we had the tools that helped them get to that point. Now, that didn't mean they didn't put a huge amount of effort in China and, to basically get that production done. But they couldn't have gotten there without us being engaged and involved to help that whole process happen. And it's our end-to-end understanding of how to make it all work that allowed it to happen.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was in that window. I'd like to tell you that you're going to wake up one day and realize that it's an epiphany, but it's not. It's a series of events of things that happen. Then you wake up one day and realize, wow, it's the hindsight is what then you can say, man, I really do get now that the process of how I got here today. So it's not like there's just one epiphany. That doesn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah. I love hearing stories like that. And, before we wrap up, I want to restate some things that I heard along the way. So one, you talked about knowing yourself and your strengths and using your strengths to build a business. You talked about trust, because if you can tell your client you suck, there's a huge amount of trust there between you and your client. In processes in place and innovation. Those were some key takeaways that I got out of what you were saying. So with that summary,
those attributes aren't random. They're all tied together with self-discipline. It all starts with, so let's get to the very core of it. So if you're going to be a great entrepreneur, you need to have faith in yourself, but not just as your own internal perception, but from a perspective that's able to step outside yourself and say, do I have the characteristics that would allow me to be one, have a high risk tolerance? Do I have the self-discipline to do the things I need to do day in, day out? And discipline, it is discipline that will allow you to turn on a dime. If people think, well, if you're highly structured, that means you're not flexible. That's not true. Discipline is what actually allows you to be able to respond and to recognize the opportunity when it's presented to you. So those are the key things. It's not how smart you are. I mean, obviously being smart, it helps, but
Yes.
we are all just gifted with what we have, right? So you have to make the most of what you have. And I will tell you, I know a lot of smart people who are terrible entrepreneurs, and a bunch of people who are barely average IQ, but they're fantastic entrepreneurs. Okay, and because they have good self-discipline, they have big confidence, and they're willing to. They're not stupid. They don't make stupid risks.
Right.
They're not foolhardy. But when they see an opportunity, they are fearless in pursuit of that opportunity. And they're quick. They're nimble and quick. They quick speed to business results. Okay, they're not afraid to make quick decisions and move. But they will also tell you, if I failed 9 times, that one time I win more than makes up for the 9 times I missed the target.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, the
That's
love
it.
of being an entrepreneur. This has been fantastic.
All right, well, I appreciate the time.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful that you got enough here.
Yeah. So what's the next phase look like for you? Where do you see the next 10 or 15 years for you?
Well, I mean, I'm already well on my way to. My goal is to move from being a service company to being a technology company. So the multiplier of a technology company is like 5 or 6 times that of a service company. And so what we're doing now is taking our software that we've developed and working to develop into something that we can package. And that we can then engage with clients either as an ASP where they just rent our software and they apply their manpower against it, or we still use the BPO model that we currently use. And so, I mean, this business has evolved far beyond even what I've discussed. I'm talking to you now from my office in Belgrade, Serbia. We have a staff over here of 13 people. We do most of our software development over here now. All of our business processing gets done over here because they're 7 hours ahead. So when Walmart writes an order, when your staff shows up in the US at 8 in the morning, your warehouse people can't go to work on it for a couple hours because they're still just trying to pull the orders, document, create the paperwork. Whereas our team, they're 7 hours ahead. So by the time the staff shows up at the warehouse in Northwest Arkansas at 7 in the morning, all the labels are there, the paperwork's there, everything they need to just go right to work and start pulling product, building the loads, and getting it shipped. It's already done. Yeah. So I'm going to continue down this path of developing sort of a footprint both in the US and in Serbia. My next step is to sort of begin to integrate some of the staff over here in Serbia, get them visas so they can come spend some time in the States, understanding the front end processes that drive a lot of what we're doing over here in Serbia. And I spend probably I come over 3 or 4 times a year to this office, and I spend anywhere from 10 days to 3 weeks. So depends on what I'm trying to get accomplished. So yeah. I see that we keep moving in that direction.
Yeah, well, that's great. And for the people that are on the show listening or watching right now, my day job is an exit planner, and so I work with companies to help do what Scott's talking about here. When he used the word multiplier or multiple, by doing what he's doing, that is intellectual property, and you can add millions to the transaction when you get ready to exit out of it. So my hat's off to you, Scott, because intellectual property is a big deal. And so that's a great path for you to go. So thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alan.
Yeah. So I'm glad you were on the show. This has been great. I wish it was an hour show. I've got more questions, but I've got to keep it short just because some people don't want to listen for a full segment like I would. But what I would like to do is create the opportunity to ask you back on sometime later this year. I think this is a great conversation, and I'd like for people to hear more about what you're doing. So I'll reach out.
There's some tools that we use for businesses to assess, because part of what we do is similar to what you do. I engage anytime I talk to a client. the first thing I do is start asking them questions. And I have this little model. It's very simple. It's called the business diamond. You got people, process, technology, and money. And how you push and pull on those four elements sort of designs what, or it drives out your strategy, what sits in the middle, right? And so based on what they can and cannot do, or what they feel they're good at or not good at, sometimes they think they're good at something, and I go and talk to them about it, and they very quickly realize, oh, maybe we're not so good. Because again, there's a difference between perception and perspective. And if you can create an environment where there's sort of a agnostic view that says, look, we're not here to judge anybody. We just want to honestly assess these four components and whether or not those four components are being used in the most efficient and effective way. And then based on the way we come out of that business diamond, that's how SAI decides, well, here's how we're going to dock with this company. Here's where our points of entry are. Here's how we're going to manage and help them be better. And generally what we find out is that over time, irrespective of our point of entry, within the course of a couple of years, we begin to realize, well, we're much better off. The more these guys do, the better off we are. Part of that's because I'm a very disciplined person, and the personality of our business is about discipline, execution, the nuts and bolts of every day. So success isn't just one monolithic big event that happens. It's all the little things that move along by the way that get done right. That's what leads to success.
Yeah.
Conversely, what leads to failure is a lot of little things that just didn't go right along the way. It's not like rarely is it one catastrophic event. A lot of times it's a lot of little things that just didn't go right, that weren't being noticed, weren't being managed, that caused the failure. So that's what we're about. Look, let's do all the little things right, manage your day-to-day business.
Yeah.
Let us do that for you, and then you go be the greatest product development or marketing person, whatever it is you want to be. Focus on what you're really, really good at. Let us deal with the minutia of making sure that it all actually happens.
Yeah. Well, that's a fantastic business model.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And I'm more than happy. If you want to reach out at some point, you got my email, send me an email. I'll respond.
All right. Great. Well, thank you for being on the show, folks. We'll catch you next time.